Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are, and wherever and whenever you're looking at this from. My name is Isaac, and I'm here with my friend Bruno. We're two business-minded engineers who like to talk about innovation, developing things, getting things done, and also focus on what makes organizations tick to get all those things done. And we call this the Puzzle Podcast. Today's discussion, which is a very, very interesting piece of the puzzle of innovation, is how to learn faster. Learning is something that we all need to do all the time, especially when we're developing new things, when we're in new organizations, new situations. Whenever things change, we need to learn to react fast and learn new things, discard all learnings. But the question remains, given all the different ways in which people learn, how can you find a way that you learn faster than your default mode, perhaps? So I'll leave the stage open to Bruno to start us off.
Thank you, Isaac. And I'll start our timer so we deliver on promise of 10 minutes. Learning is a topic very close to my heart, and I'm happy to see that more and more is discussed about it, even though as a concept, especially in business, it isn't so new, like the learning organization, what was that, 80s, 90s, when it was at its peak. Today, or at least the position I want to take is that broadly in organizations, we have two types of learning, incidental and deliberate. And a lot of focus in the last few years has been on deliberate learning, like be curious, set up experiments, hypotheses, fail fast, learn something from it. That is important, but incidental learning should not be ignored. Incidental learning is, as you're doing your job every day, you will be gaining new skills, new capabilities, etc. Deliberate learning just helps emphasize that and add specifically points where you're looking to learn something more about. Now, awareness of these two, I think, is very important to increasing the speed of learning, because you cannot ignore your everyday learning. And even when you start setting up these learning experiments, you're not starting from a blank slate. Like Bruno knows stuff, Bruno knows. Isaac knows stuff, Isaac knows. We should not pretend that there's no background to where we are. We should leverage that to accelerate learning whatever we want to learn next. And there's so much that can be shared about it, but kind of the practice I've been really focusing lately on is sometimes called reflection or reflexivity. And in other words, that is connecting the dots. Like if you think about deliberate learning and business experiments as learning a specific thing, that's one single dot. But there's a lot of value in pausing and thinking about all this learning, either your own or within the team, within the organization, and making connections that previous were unknown to you or the organization team or whatever else might be. There's immense value in that, and it's accessible. It's right here. You do not need to spend 10 years running different experiments, R&D projects, etc. It's all here, but it requires different set of, let's say, discipline, skills, and practices compared to traditional, what we traditionally consider learning.
I like the split, the incidental and deliberate. I have also seen that in organizations, there is, as you said, the whole story about lean startup and agility and entrepreneurial spirit and all that has led a lot of the discussion around how to structure this search process, call it the search for knowledge or for undoing old knowledge and finding new one. It has led to trying to be very systematic about it, with all the canvases and the post-its and the experiments and how to test new business ideas. And yet, I also see that many times, because there's so many unknown unknowns, as one guy in the US once called them, which I think was actually a brilliant quote, which I really like. There is a lot of power in allowing things to just happen without you pre-planning them. And my experience has also been, especially as a product manager, as somebody who develops products, is you have sometimes no idea what you do not know. Like it's unknown unknowns to the degree that you will smack your forehead by saying, how did this never occur to me before? Therefore, I wouldn't even call it a balance between, it reminds me of the discussion between small g growth and capital G growth. Is it a balance? Only in the sense that you have limited resources and time, you need to balance how you split your efforts and time between them. But in reality, you need to do both. So you need both to have some kind of a structured approach on how you deal with new things you need to learn, and to be open to figuring things out. Now, this sounds all very fluffy. So how would you approach this? How would you not strike a balance, but how would you allow both ways of learning in your life, in your project, in your organization, in your team, whatever?
Yeah. No, this is okay. One by one. I would agree. We should not seek balance here. Learning isn't like growth. Learning isn't like other activities. I would also say that to an extent, learning is also connected to a personality. Like some people are just more predispositioned to be more curious, have stronger desire to continuously grow, learn, etc., etc. So I wouldn't necessarily go here for a balance. What I would go for is what you described as systematic learning, systematic experimentation, etc. They're usually targeted at specific knowledge gaps. But what's critical for you to understand these knowledge gaps, you need to have this open-minded approach to learning, that incidental learning, which you didn't use those words, but when everything is unknown, when you're in the unknown unknowns, the only way to get unstuck is to act.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're acting blindly. So if you want to have that incidental learning, you have to act in such a way that you're still receptive to what is happening around you. So think about introducing new product in a new market. That is not total unknown, right? Because you can learn a lot of things from the competitors, from potential customers, etc. So you can clarify the air a little bit, but let's say that it's still pretty dark. So what you do, you can act not by introducing a whole new portfolio of products, but your act can be reaching out to potential partners, going to the market, doing some customer interviews. That's a small act that will illuminate the situation a bit better. In process improvement, Kaizen, Toyota Production System, etc., you go to the Gemba, you go to the workplace to figure out the unknown unknowns. You get closer to the reality to start kind of removing that fog. How you keep on learning is to try to remain as curious as you possibly can be in those moments. And that is a problem because in my experience, and this is my bias as well, I think we are all pretty much born curious, but our education system and in general our societal systems to an extent punish curiosity. Asking too many questions can sometimes be frowned upon for whatever social reasons, educational reasons, etc. And then suddenly when you go into companies, you're supposed to ask all these questions. But you come into the meeting, you ask the wrong question, you get derided or something. Worse than that happens. Now we have all these conversations about concepts of psychological safety and whatnot. To me, it's almost like, why are we not solving the root cause? I don't think psychological safety is the root cause. The root cause is our whole approach to the curiosity from the kindergarten to the, elementary school, high school, university, while you're continuously being beaten, like, don't be too curious, don't be too curious. And then you get into the workplace and then it's like, where's your curiosity? Oh, this is a wrong type of curiosity. Why aren't you learning fast enough? I'll stop here.
So it strikes me as very similar to what I've seen also. And yes, ideally we would solve the root cause. Given that we are probably very far away from doing that on a societal level. Something which has come to mind over the past months where I've been developing something is the fact that we also have a split not only between incidental and deliberate, but also in terms of the expected effort to learn something, and to which degree. What you said earlier about organizations, for sure you've seen in some companies, you have this dynamic where you have the expert, and the expert, once he speaks, everybody shuts up, or they're expected to shut up. At least I've seen this, not in every organization, usually engineering-focused organizations where you have someone who has deep knowledge on something, they are the final authority, which is, to a large part, very, very dangerous. Then you have the challenge of taking people who will spend fewer and fewer years as we grow as a business world. People will spend fewer and fewer years in any given role, in any given organization, any given team, company, industry, whatever. And somehow we need to bring them up to a sufficient degree of understanding to not mess things up, while also managing that friction between those who are, let's say, temporary newbies or total newbies, and those who have been there for 30 years, 40 years, and it's actually a generation gap. And they need to somehow deal with the fact that they have to accept that people will come in, they're not going to spend 10 or 20 or 40 or 50 years doing the same thing again and again, which is fine also, that is also needed. And yet they have to explain the same things to every newbie who comes in. And there the question is, if you accept this as a situation that is basically call it a mega trend, call it how things evolve over the last years, how do you guide people to get not as fast as possible to some kind of understanding, but to a good 80-20 understanding? So put in, 20% of the effort and get 80% of the learning is probably quite difficult in engineering organizations but you also don't start from scratch. You usually come in through engineering studies or some kind of other technical study that puts you in the mindset. But how do you get them far enough that they can also take it upon themselves to learn out of this curiosity that is hopefully innate and not entirely dead? There you have also the difference in learning approaches. There are people who, I remember an image, I don't know where I saw it many, many years ago. It was showing a train. And it was the article or whatever it was explaining that there are some people who want to learn, wait, what is this train doing? Where is it going? What is supposed to, what does it have loaded? Where is it supposed to go? In which time frame and so on? And there are people who say, look, I don't care where the train is going. Tell me what is in that wagon, in that wagon, in that wagon, in that wagon, and then I'll figure out what it is. So some people focus on the small stuff, and they feel they need to understand everything very deeply, and then synthesize. So from the bottom up, they make an mental image of what this is, and so that's how they learn. And other people are like, don't give me the details. Give me from the top down, and then give me enough context, and allow me to dive deeper. And there you have also this in my experience is almost like a personality trait. I know people from all the spectrum of depth first or breadth first learning. There's everything I can imagine. There's the super expert, the Germans call them sometimes Fachidioten, so subject matter idiots, which we've mentioned before. And that's also, it's derogatory, but it has the danger that you become super expert in details that nobody cares about, where the leverage is tiny. The return on investment will never be evident. And there are people who are like butterflies, right? They fly around, they land on one of the flowers. Oh, this looks interesting right now. Let's dive deeper. Then they say, well, enough of that. Let's go somewhere else. And that is, I've seen it. It creates tension within an organization because the core challenge is learn enough to get things done and not mess things up. But there is a force pulling you towards, yes, I know I should learn, I should be curious, but I like to fly around. And there are people who will not accept you if you do not show as an employee, as a colleague, the willingness and the ability, which let's assume that you have the ability, the willingness to go deep in a topic and come up and say, well, my hands are dirty now, like yours, after so many years. I'm kind of part of your system. I'm also like a mini expert. And I find this stretches organizations as the gap between what the career is increases in people's minds. People used to work for life in a company. Now people work for 2 or 3 years. They're off to the next one or even change the industry. That is a tricky business to be in, and if that's learning related.
So I'm just looking at the time. I want to be respectful of the promise. So I'll just briefly add to what you shared, Isaac. One observation and one offer suggestion to the listeners. So observation. There is a lot of truth in the saying knowledge is power. We consider that to be true. So a lot of how learning and curiosity and everything connected to learning happens in organizations is connected to our perception of relationship between the knower and what can there be known. Mm-hmm. And in our case, in a lot of cases, it is a power relationship. And that's why we have all these experts who usually earned their right to be expert by a lot of sacrifice, a lot of dedication, where it becomes a power exchange instead of knowledge exchange. We basically end up equating knowledge exchange with power exchange, which for all different reasons makes it difficult to work efficiently in an organization. We have seen more and more of these participatory methods. If you think about design thinking, lean startup, all these methods, they to an extent democratize learning. They remove this power differential and say anyone can learn quickly with these different methods. So one observation that I offer to everyone to reflect on, especially in bigger organizations, is, what's your personal relationship with knowledge? Do you consider it to be your superpower? How are you sharing knowledge? How do you give access to others? How do you determine how will you share with others? It's just something to reflect on. It's not something that anyone will change overnight, but it's a helpful lens, or at least it was for me. Like, I'm, as I work as independent expert, I am in the knowledge profession. But in my case, I trade knowledge for finance. This is what people pay me for. Like, I know a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of things. I know how to get things done. But even with that, when I come to the client, I share everything openly, because I know that just sharing is not the same as practice. That's one. Another one is, people talk a lot about incentives, and especially curiosity being a hot topic. Now, I want to be a contrarian here and say, you do not need to incentivize curiosity. What you need to do, especially if you're a leader, you need to stop punishing curiosity. That's what you need to look for. Like, okay, let's just remove, all the, it's usually accidental punishment, subconscious punishment. It's not like somebody goes up and says, oh, we're going to beat that guy or girl up because they were curious. No, it's most like, really? You're bringing that up again? Haven't we already done that? Did you do your research? We tried that and it didn't really work. Yeah, we tried it 10 years ago. Why try it again? It's more this kind of things. Focus on removing, all these subtle blockers and punishments for curiosity, and you will see much, much bigger improvement than, hiring or giving a task to HR to figure out a new incentive system for curiosity, learning, and experimentation.
Very difficult to do so. If you were, final point is, if you were able to get this done within an organization, then what are you doing in an organization? You should be out there changing the world, right? But it's not what happens. And generally, people think that because they had success in one company, one context, they can somehow now they can change the world. They fail miserably because they do not take into account the context and the fact that not everything they did was because of what they did. Well, not everything they achieved is because was successful because of what they did, but because there was a myriad of other factors that also helped them towards success. So I think we explored quite a lot. It's a huge, huge question, and we can cut it and slice it in many different ways, which we might do in a future episode. But for now, we'll see you next time. And I think a topic of how to set incentives, that sounds very interesting. So this is maybe the one we'll do next. Have a good evening. Goodbye.